Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this event. My name is Lerato Letebele Belandrin, Head of Communications here at the CER. It is such a pleasure to have you all joining us as we celebrate 10 years of the Center for Environmental Rights. It is a pleasure to have Daylin Paul here with us, who is going to be talking us through and taking us through the virtual exhibition of the incredible body of work and collection of images titled Broken Land. Daylin, can you tell me the story behind this image that we're seeing that's also the cover of the book?
So, this image of the boy playing with the ball in front of this felt fire, it's not necessarily directly related to coal burning or coal mining, but when I saw the scene, so Pola is the township outside of Oorgis, and it struck me as like this kind of metaphor for the situation that not just the people of Mpumalanga, but like all of us in the world are in. I mean, without like reading too deeply into it, I mean, that ball is kind of like the world. And we're like that boy, like sort of blissfully unaware of this, this thing that's right behind us. And yeah, and then, in the editing booth afterwards, like looking at the images, it was ironic that right behind the smoke were power pylons and electrical lines. And I mean, that's just something throughout, the book and the province. You just, the landscapes and the skies are always divided by these lines and the pylons as well.
And for me, I also connect with this because, a lot of the work we do in terms of, educating people and also the social justice work we do is really to kind of change the trajectory of what our planet is going to look like, right? I mean, these are like, this is the future generation we're looking at, right?
Yeah.
And this child who's having to grow up where, this is probably a huge part of his reality on a daily basis, and the implications of that. I think it's also quite powerful to have to then, to visually capture that the essence, but also the innocence of children. Kids are blissfully unaware, of these realities, but it really is up to us as civil society, but also, with creatives such as yourself, to ensure that we capture these stories and to hopefully try and leave behind a future that's habitable for generations of these kids, such of these kids.
Look, I agree wholeheartedly. And I mean, the thing is, for this boy, he doesn't know a world without this, without the pollution that's in the air around him every single day of his life in Bola, and climate change, like COVID-19, like so many different things that we've encountered in the last few years, doesn't care about borders. Borders are things that we've created. Nature doesn't respect that. And yeah, as much as this is, the issue of coal burning and mining in Mpumalanga is a South African issue, it's a massively regional and global issue. It affects every single person. I think that's, the danger, but then also kind of the opportunity of what's happening with climate change. It's climate crisis, actually, is that it's a chance for us to reevaluate, like, where are we and what do we want from our future? Because the decisions that have led us to this point, it's not like they're making the world a happier, better place. The majority of people in the world live like the people in Mpumalanga. They live on the outskirts of capital. They live off the breadcrumbs that fall off the table of capital. They don't get a say. They don't get a seat at the table. So yeah, it's a lot of different things at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see what else is in here. There's quite a lot of landscape and images that really show people in the same space, with the destruction in the background, such as what we're seeing here. Tell me a little bit about that story that you're telling.
It would be terrible enough if these areas existed in some sort of like a Blade Runner dystopia, industrial zone, right? But the fact that people are living in such close proximity to it makes it all the more worse. I mean, sort of the symbol for climate crisis or climate change is the Arctic ice and the polar bears. People are thinking about that, but that's very far away. We're dealing with it right now, actually, and people have been dealing with this for decades already. It's just the temperature, literally and figuratively, has just ramped up in the last few years. We're forced to pay attention. But this is from Mpumalanga, the township outside of Secunda. Like people have been sick there for a very long time. And yeah, it's quite dystopian in a lot of ways because the township was built downwind of Secunda's plant, right? So the people in Secunda, the town, don't get it as bad as the people in the township. And it's just like, how did you even think that? How, what kind of thought processes led to somebody thinking like, let's do that, And I think that sort of mentality, whether it's governments or whether it's companies of like, we're going ahead at all costs. And the cost is too high. The cost is way too high.
Profit over people, hey.
I mean, Yeah, that's it. That's the lived reality of people every single day in Mpumalanga. But like, what's the point of profit if there are no people? Like, eventually capitalism reaches some sort of a stage where if you turn everybody into a consumer, but you've already taken all of their money, what are you going to sell them?
Sure. What else do we have? Wow.
So this was, I guess, kind of the awakening of me, realizing what this issue was. I mean, I made this back in 2015 when I was out in the province on another assignment, and I was in the back of the car. Somebody else was driving, and that windmill is kind of the symbol in so many ways of like South African agriculture. You don't find those particular windmills really anywhere else. It's a very South African thing. And this giant dust storm was approaching, and I was like, well, that's it, right? That's literally it. And it's like this little outcrop of. I mean, when you settle land, you need water, right? And that's what those windmills are there from. I mean, when the settlers came and started dividing up land and this and that, for each plot you needed water. And so it's that understanding of air, land, and water, which is altogether inherent in the windpomp, in the water windmill. And, it's being threatened by this massive, formless, semi-invisible monster, and I just thought it was such a great metaphor for it's like this little corner of light and this little corner of like understanding of water, air, and land, and it's just under assault, Mm-hmm. I mean, a lot of the pictures just kind of came about from realizing things that I'd made photographs of almost as like a sketchbook. So I mean, there's the more formalized, especially with the portraits, right, where it's very considered. Yeah? And then there's other times where I use the camera as just a notepad and a sketchbook, feelings that I felt when I saw something, making a note of it. And I guess it's one of the benefits of digital. It's not costing me like every time, like it would with film. But just to be able to reference something afterwards, because I keep on going back to that image, even though it was one of the very first that I made, because it's almost like the mission statement of the book, or of my work in climate change. It's like there is something worth holding on to, and there may be a little bit of hope, but it's hope, and we've got to fight.
Mm-hmm. We definitely have to fight. I mean, I look at this image, and just it's in black and white, and you'll tell me a little bit more about obviously the choice of sticking with the black and white as a style, but that's nature. What we're seeing there would be plush land, that people can live off and sustain themselves from, right? And in there's just, industry, destruction, that inevitably doesn't even belong there. You can see it's out of place, and that image captures it so well. Tell us a little bit about that.
If I remember correctly, I'll have to look at the original raw files. Believe it or not, it's not as green as you would think.
Wow.
So those trees that are on the riverbank, they're that beautiful dark green. Everything else is a little bit of that browny kind of dryness. And okay, so South Africa is a water scarce country. We've known that like since forever, right? There was a lot of water, relatively speaking, in Mpumalanga, especially like the Christmasmere catchment and the Olifants catchment and places like that, right? And you need water obviously for life and for farming and for drinking and this and that, but you also need it for heavy industry. You need it, I mean, when people are fracking now, they basically push water in at really high pressures into the earth, in order to split it. For coal, they have to wash it. For steel and for all of these different processes and companies that are out in the Mpumalanga Highveld, they demand water. They eat water in order to survive. And it's like that priority choice thing again. It's like, well, what do we have water for? Is the water there so that people can drink and eat and farm and live? or is it there so that we can make a profit? And in some ways, I mean, like for me, this picture, like the winding of the river, it's almost like some sort of really dystopian, twisted El Dorado. Like that river is like the road that we're following towards this bleakness, which is the power station. And with like satellite footage and really high up aerial footage, you can see that these things they're like scars on the land. Like what the land is, it carries on in its normal sort of a flow, and then all of a sudden you just have this. I mean, it's almost like a tumor, to be honest. I mean, when I look at it, when I see it, I just see this gross aberration. The way that I described it to the Ernest Cole Foundation was cathedrals of destruction. They're like monuments built to this idea of what humanity's purpose is and what progress is. They really are monuments because it's a massive undertaking to make it. Whether it be a factory of the scale that we see in Mpumalanga or these power stations or the mines, but it's totally out of place. Excuse me, and it's. Yeah, what would you call it? Cognitive dissonance, right? That I felt when I was growing up, and I thought that the Mpumalanga, or at that time as it was the West Transvaal, right, was Kruger National Park, and it was this protected, beautiful area, and this is part of our heritage as South Africans. I mean, people know that. Like we got the big five on our money. Like nature is a part of us in South Africa, and I think that's one of the things that cuts across all of our religious or cultural or racial divisions. And people love this land, and we're very blessed with this land. I mean, the types of different ecosystems we have. I mean, from Cape Town all the way, let's just say to Bite Bridge. I mean, we have deserts, we have mountains, we have forests, we have incredible ocean life, we have. Like where I come from on the East Coast, it's like tropical and more like jungly. Like we have everything here, but it's like we're pouring it in for what? To turn it into a battery. Like, yeah, that really stuck with me, and that's why I think I take this as personally as I do.
Yeah, that's definitely one of my personal favorite images. Yeah, it speaks 1,000 words, but yeah, tell us about this image, Daylin.
I'll add a couple words onto that. I mean, that's it, right? That's literally where we are right now. We're in this haze. We don't know which way is forward. All we know is that we need power, And I mean, that's Kusile, yeah. So one of the new power plants. I think it's like the biggest in the world. It's still not working. You can actually, in the photo, if you look very closely, you can still see the cranes and stuff because it's not operational yet. I mean, it's cost the South African people so much of money, and it's cost the people of Mpumalanga, so much of their well-being and their health. And it's so stark, It's unavoidable, like. These things just like this, it just materializes out of dense air, and you just see it for what it is sometimes. You just you can't hide behind smoke. Smoke and mirrors forever. Like eventually, somebody like the emperor's new clothes, like somebody will show it or see it for what it is and be like, no, And I think that however they want to try and frame progress and like the fourth industrial revolution and all the rest of the stuff, ultimately that is what this photograph is what that vision is. That's what they think, the future is going to be for us because they literally invested in Kusile for that purpose.
And where is this?
So this is just south of Malahleni. It is Duva Power Station, yeah? And Duva, okay, I scouted it out, right? So I knew that the sun would be rising behind it. And what you don't see is between the pylons and then the power station itself, there's this river or dam. It's a body of water, and it's quite strange. It's eerie because it's unnaturally still. I mean, I have seen some fishermen out there, I don't know what kind of fish they're catching. But like in color, the hues are very beautiful. It goes from purple to pink to this and that and to orange and red. And then, the grass in the foreground is this very beautiful golden color. But it's like one of the weird things about pollution is that it actually makes like sunsets and sunrises look pretty, right? And that's part of the reason why I chose to approach the project in monochrome, in black and white. But yeah, it's the balance of this picture is what I really liked. I mean, so there's 3 stacks on each side of the facility. There's 3 pylons, and as the smoke is coming out of the ones on the left, there's the sun there, and it's just like, I don't know. We talk about all these metaphors in South Africa, like a new dawn. Like, is this our new dawn? Like, yeah.
And all of it just to power our homes, just to generate electricity. Is it all worth it? There's definitely got to be a better way and a new way of actually approaching how we as human beings, really tap into those resources that we need for ourselves. It should not be at the detriment of the environment, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's 2 things on that note. I mean, I think I like science fiction. I think a lot of the time science fiction allows human beings to consider what a future may be like, right? With a given set of constraints. So whether it be robots or aliens or this and that. And like, the one thing that I heard that made me really think was that if aliens ever had to come to this planet of ours, they would be very surprised or bemused by the fact that we dig around in the earth, for things to burn in order to make electricity when we have a giant nuclear reactor that we orbit around, at the center of our solar system. I mean, there's that. There's also the fact that I think that we sometimes give ourselves way too much credit for our cleverness as a species, as we think. Because, I mean, and I stand to be corrected, like other than batteries and solar power, the only way that we know how to make electricity really is by turning a wheel through a magnetic field. That's it. I mean, so we're boiling all of this water so that it can drive a pedal and create an electrical charge. Whether it's a hydroelectric dam, it does the same thing. That's all we know how to do. Like all of this electricity that powers everything is because we learned one trick. When you move something with a magnetic charge through a magnetic field, it creates energy. And it's like, it's been a couple of 100 years. Can we not think of some more,
Yeah.
than spinning something around in a circle? Like there are other ways. We're just not prepared to look at them. There's not the political, but also the industrial will to look at those alternatives. I mean, it's coming now. You see all of these people like the oil companies and stuff saying, reduce your carbon footprint and we're about the future and this and that. It's like, yeah, you all made your money. Now you want to get in on the new thing, which is like how people are going to move away from how you've been making money for all of these years into this new way that you want to make money for the future. And it's like, no.
Yeah.
No. Well, we need to find a new way because this isn't working. It really isn't.
Yeah, I'm also quite curious at the creative process that goes into it, and perhaps on the receiving side of it, as an audience, how do you think your images make people feel? Perhaps people who might not actually be aware of the impacts of coal, and people who have never been to Mpumalanga, for example, and they see an image like that, and even the next one that I think you had gone to. How do you anticipate that these images will actually make people feel?
To be honest, I never think that far ahead. I mean, for me, it's just documentation. And my thing is always like, well, here's the evidence, make up your own mind. The audience is always going to have, or the viewer is always going to have their own interpretation. I mean, we could show the exact same this set of photographs to, a bunch of activists, a bunch of people that are living in Mpumalanga, and then a bunch of the mining and energy companies in Mpumalanga. They all know it, or they'll all see it in the same way, but they'll all interpret it in a different way. My thing is it's just evidence. It's just documentation. It's like, look, this is what I saw. What do you think about this? And I think, I mean, that's what I aim to do with my questions is not to give answers, but to ask questions or to make people ask questions, because that's what we need to do, whether it be asking our governments, like, what are you doing about this? Or if we start going to the mining companies and be like, are you responsible for this? But it comes first from the act of questioning and not taking things for granted that, like, well, this is the way it is and the way that it's always been. You know, we've grown up with electricity, at least, you know, my generation being born in the 80s and this and that, as a given, right? I mean, okay, load shedding is happening and all the rest of that. But I mean, like one generation before that, you know, so like our parents and grandparents, you know, electricity was not a novelty, but it was a luxury, and it was something to like aspire towards. You know, one day I'm going to get a house with electricity. We were still living. We've been living for most of our existence as a species without it. You know, I'm not saying in any way that we need to take away electricity or like go back to the Stone Age or something like that, but we just got to do it in the right way. You know, I mean, it's equivalent of saying that we need water, so we're going to allow this area to flood. You know what I mean? Like, of course you need the water, but not at the cost of everything else. And and the cost isn't being paid by government per se or by the companies per se. It's being paid by the people. So like, if the electricity is supposed to be there to serve people, right? But then they're actually not, number one, getting access to it a lot of the time. Number two, they're paying through their teeth for it. And then number three, they're dying because of it. Then is it really serving them, or is it serving something else? Yeah. So, I mean, these are, look, let nobody fool you, audience, but like, photographs aren't the truth. They are a truth, you know? This is my way of looking. This is my way of seeing, and there's no manipulation or effects or anything like that, but like, it's a conscious choice every time that I choose to press the shutter. I don't zoom in and out. I've only got like one lens, a fixed lens, a 35mm, which is the same view or frame of view as the human eye. So I show it like as I would see it. And yes, there's multiple ways of looking at, I mean, like even this facility, this is Secunda, like in a lot of ways, people will see that or see the facility and they'll think jobs and they'll think, wow, you know, there would be no town of Secunda without this plant and wada. Okay, you know, there's, I mean, my dad always used to say there's three sides. There's always at least three sides to every story. Your side, my side, and the right side. I mean, there's lots of different sides, but this is just mine, and it's up to the viewers to decide for themselves. Yeah.
One thing I've also noticed is with the images, sometimes it's not just the people that are in there, but you also capture nature and the animals, you know, that would naturally be roaming free. I mean, this is also a really incredible image. Tell me a little bit about that.
Look, I mean, I myself am very drawn to animals. I guess it's part of the reason why I care about the environment. And I think, again, especially South Africans, maybe culturally being so like about the environment and about like animals and pets and things like that. I mean, like a lot of middle class people in South Africa probably care more about animal rights than human rights. I mean, let's be honest, right? Yep. Straight up. So there's something about in a similar way, it's like a photograph of a child, because it lacks the same sort of agency that an adult human being would have. Sometimes people feel more sad, you know, because they're like, oh, this poor thing, like, you know, how can it be living like that? It's like, well, okay, you're on the right track, but how about the people as well, you know? Look, I do feel empathetic and sympathetic towards in all life, right? I just think that showing that this is a space that is a living space, you know, not just for people and not just for industry, right, or for commerce, but like a living place where there's trees and there's water and there's birds and there's, you know, sure, domesticated animals, but also farm animals, wild animals, sorry. And I mean, like this tree in the picture, it's broken. We have broken Mpumalanga, like we've broken it in half to use as firewood, essentially, to use those people and their lives and their air and their water and everything as some sort of a sacrifice for our misguided attempts at some sort of a progress which is not consultative, a progress which does not include the will of the people and what they need. It's a progress or a vision of progress that we're told, we're not even sold it, we're told that this is what progress is and that we have to accept it. And I mean, these photographs of me are just my way of saying I don't accept it. You know. Yeah, I mean, I thought that this one, I mean, this is also back from 2015. It didn't make the cut of the book per se, but I thought that this was interesting because, you know, what cattle mean in Nguni culture as well. So, I mean, when it comes to profit, right? I mean, like the old people used to say, it's like, well, what is money? You can't eat money. You can't do anything with it and whatever. You know, like...
This was the real wealth, right?
That was it. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I mean... Even in India, I mean, I'm both South African, but I'm of Indian origin or whatever. Like cows are venerated because if you've got a cow, you've at least got milk.
Yeah.
You know, you've got something to trade with. You've got something that you can breed. You've got something, you know, something tangible or whatever. And I mean, in a lot of ways, this picture actually makes me think of the abandoned Ndebele village that I found. Because it's like that way of life, that harmony that people were living with nature, you know? And that sense of what wealth is, of what security is, of what prosperity is. You know, as much as our land has been contaminated by the extraction of coal, so is our culture. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, once again, I mean... people living in such close proximity to the industry.
Yeah, this is Komati Power Station, and the name of the settlement is Big House because of that big farm barn that you see in the right-hand side. So what happened is that because of the power station, right, people thought that there would be a chance of employment and stuff like that. So they started building, they started occupying the land. On the riverbank directly opposite Komati Power Station. Now, it didn't really work out that way for them. There's no jobs for them when they're inside there. I mean, it's one or two guys that I met, at least during my time, that had like, there's one guy in the book that actually had a job like preparing food or something. Like he basically had a shisanyama like outside. So he was making some sort of a profit out of the power station being there. But I mean, and the haunting thing about this picture, when I look at it again, is that you'll see that those pylons are going past the settlement. They live right next to Komati, right? The sulfurous, kind of stinking water that comes out of there gets pumped into the river that separates them from the power station itself. I mean, that water floods when it's rainy season and their houses, you know, get damaged and this and that. But they don't even get the electricity. They don't even get the electricity. So, yeah, that was Big House. I mean, it's just... And I mean, that's one particular place, but that story happens over and over. Both the economic and the electric opportunities, let's call them that, are just... I mean, they promised but never given.
Sure. I mean, that's also quite a haunting image that...
Yeah, so this was in an artisanal mine in Ermelo, right? I'm extremely claustrophobic. I'm super, super claustrophobic, so I was really scared to go into this mine. I mean, there's no safety equipment, there's no beams, there's no like SOPs or anything like take your chances. But I saw children and women working in there, and I was like, yeah, I had all the safety gear, I had like ropes. I was like, if anything happens, like, you know, this and that. And they were just laughing at me, and I was like, you know, I just gotta just do it, you know. So I built this rig actually on a helmet that I have, where there was light that was, you know, then shining from it. And I tried some video recording. It didn't really work out because it's so dark in there. So I was using an f1.4 lens, wide open, just to get anything. And the only way that I would get a picture is by shining the light on my head on something and choosing one thing to focus on only, right? And then letting it all come out. Look, it's controversial. It's a controversial image, I think, in a lot of ways, because people are like, oh, you know, summers and this and that, right? coal is deeply problematic, and the way that we're using it is definitely making the situation worse. But if I think about like the Freedom Charter, and I think about the fact that it says, the mineral wealth of this land shall belong to all of its inhabitants. Why do we allow companies to come in and take this at scale, right? When people that have no income or no opportunity otherwise, right, they've only got this little plot, or this little communal mine. And yes, okay, of course, like the burning of that coal is still going to contribute towards climate change and this and that. But like, if what do we expect people to do otherwise? Like sit and die? On one side, you always get, people saying, South Africans are so lazy, like they just wait for the government to do stuff for them, and they want this and they want that, and they don't want to go out and get it. And I was like, no, I don't believe that, because I've seen people risking their lives in a handmade mine because they don't want to live their lives the way that they've been forced to, I mean, it's easy. I mean, there's kids there. Like, there's kids in there, literally. Because it's like families doing it so that there's an income to come into those families. So I think that there should be a space and a place for artisanal miners, and I think that unless we can provide people with an alternative, we've got no right to judge, at least when it comes to coal. Yeah, I think another interesting thing about this picture, though, is that you can see how cramped it is. So that helmet of mine was scratched up to bits afterwards, because you basically have to squat. You either have to bend over, right, to walk in there, or you need to like frog walk. And because I needed the light, I couldn't bend over because then the light would just be showing straight down. So I had to kind of frog walk, which is great for my quads, I guess. Not that you'd say now, but but it's so tight in there, and it's so humid. I mean, it's so bitterly cold outside, right? And there's no humidity at all. But like in there, it's just, I mean, my camera is permanently damaged from being in there. And like the way that I considered it is that it was like a sacrifice towards this project, because the little particles of coal, they stick to the moisture in the air itself, and then it gets sucked into the camera, to the lens elements and stuff, because it's microscopic kind of a thing. And then as you come out of the humidity and the heat of the mine and then back into the cold air, it's like taking it's like the opposite sort of an effect of taking a Coke out of the fridge, right, when it starts to perspire. So all of that liquid, right, which has got little coal particles on it, then dries up immediately in the inside of the lens and on the camera sensor. And so that, I mean, I still use that camera. I've had to like map out the spots and this and that, but I think that it's telling in some ways that, number one, those microscopic particles are now in my camera forever, forgetting about like, my lungs and the people whose theirs lungs, right? But then also, like, I literally carry a little piece of this with me, no matter where I am, And
Sure. Well.
yeah, I mean, those mines, it's amazing to see how people can actually, not just the enterprising skills, but like the sense of community, even. I mean, there's order there. This is not a free-for-all. I mean, this artisanal mine, there's rules, there's shifts. There's a way of making sure that people don't overmine. Every family or every group that does it has a set amount of time and a set amount of shifts and this and that, so that it doesn't turn into chaos otherwise. So it's amazing, because ultimately, if we don't come in and preach to people about how they need to do stuff, if you give people a resource, they can manage it themselves. Really. And I mean, the thing is that it shouldn't be coal. It really shouldn't be coal. But the thing is, the majority of people living out in the township of Wesselton outside of Ermelo, right? I wouldn't say the majority, but a lot of the people, like, they don't have access to electricity, They're using that coal like it's the 1800s to like power up their stoves and to stay warm during winter and all of the rest of that. So it is amazing to see that, like, without any formal training or any of the rest of that stuff, human beings want to live, and they want to live in a dignified way, and they will fight hard. They will do labor, hard labor, risky labor, just to try and pull themselves out of this kind of structural poverty is unnecessary. We know that there's so much of wealth in the land, but the way that we do it is just totally wrong.
And where is this?
So this is the Secunda CTS. In Secunda town, in Mpumalanga. And it is, from what I've read, the biggest SO2 emitter in the world. And it was this facility that crystallized my decision to fight this battle and to get involved and to make the book and to do all of this stuff. It's just, I mean, I write about it in the introduction of the book, so I'm not going to speak too much about it, but it's just, there's flames that come out of the top of those chimney stacks, and especially at night, it's really eerie. It's very Lord of the Ringsy, you know, it looks like Sauron's eye on top of Mordor. And I was like, it really is like the Emperor's new clothes, because if you have to show that to a kid, they'll be like, nope, that's not right. You know, you show it to people and they're like, this is, you know, this is progress, right? I think it's a great metaphor, the Secunda CTS facility for so much of what's going on. I mean, my understanding, and I stand to be corrected, was that it was built, you know, during the apartheid regime. So the first one is, I think, Sasolburg, and the name Secunda comes from second, so it was a backup facility, right? And then during the embargo of South Africa during apartheid, I think when OPEC countries weren't dealing in oil in South Africa because of its racist governance, they came up with this plan of synthesizing petroleum from coal, because there was this massive abundance of coal. That's how Sasol was started, you know. It was a parastatal, it's now its own private entity. But the process that they used, the Fischer-Tropsch process, I mean, like the Nazis came up with that, you know, like, and it's this incredibly violent chemical process in order to get petroleum out of coal. And it's like it's some sort of weird alchemy in their mind, like making gold out of something. But like, yeah, it's so polluted there. It's just, you know, and we're not under embargo anymore. So like, do we really need to do this? And I know it's just layer upon layer. The fact that there's like Nazi technology involved, the fact that it's like, you know, it was created because of like apartheid policies, and the fact that it's still going on. It's just like, yeah, if it was a person, you know, you look at like the case history or like, you know, the pattern of behavior, but now it's a company. So it's a little bit different, right? But is it? You know, like with all of these corporations, you don't seem to, nobody seems to know who to aim at, right? Because they're faceless, they're a board or they're shareholders and they're this and they're that. But what if you actually looked at those companies the way that the law does, as legal entities? And if you had to consider that, like, well, they have a pattern of behavior. Every time they go into a place, they do this, they do that, they do that. So if you don't want to hold the board or the shareholders or whatever accountable, if you want to consider that company to be its own, like, separate legal entity, right? Why don't we maybe profile these people the way that you would a serial killer or the way that you would a mass murderer? It's like, well, what is the thinking behind this? Because I tell you what, it has all of these industries have some very clear characteristics, right? They don't waste time. They don't waste money. They will lay waste to the land. They will lay waste to people's lives and to water sources and all the rest of that. So it kind of strikes one like if these corporations were a person, there'd be some sort of a sociopath. You know, if not a full-on psychopath, like actually trying to like just destroy people for the sake of it. It's just like a sociopath in terms of the way, like, they just don't care.
Yeah.
They just don't care. It just doesn't register. It's like, look,
Not my problem.
not my problem. You know, I'm out here making money. Like that's their mind. It's like, look at the bottom line. I came to that realization, right? Of I mean that turn of speech, like the bottom line. What is the bottom line? Bottom line is at the bottom. It's at the end of a shareholder report. At the end of the day, all of the other statistics, how many people died, how much of water was used, and this and that. It all just comes down to the bottom line, and that's all that these guys think about. You know.
Daylin, I think now we've reached that part of the book where we see a lot of portraits of people, what you call environmental portraits. Tell me about that concept, and then, of course, tell us about this portrait that we're looking at now.
Look, so I mean, environmental portraiture is supposed to be the discipline within portrait photography, where the elements that make up the background and the environment, literally, that the person is situated within, contribute towards your understanding of that person and their identity and their location and all of those things. So the opposite of that would be a studio portrait where somebody's just against a black background and it's just about them. And so, yeah, with this man, he was a farmer. He'd gotten this plot of land not too far away from the Secunda facility, which you can see in the background. And he had goats. He was struggling. He was in a lot of pain. Yeah? He told me that at nighttime he would have sinus attacks. Which, a lot of people there are using Vicks for their nose and Grandpa for their headaches. And you see Grandpa adverts everywhere. It's incredible.
Sure.
But yeah, I really liked with this the way that just his natural pose flowed with the power lines that were cutting across the sky in sort of a complementary way. But then also that aspects of his identity are very clear. So you can see that he's Sotho. You can see that he's a farmer because he's got gumboots on. There's little things like that show. And then you've got his goats in the background, and then further behind that is Secunda. So that's literally his situation. That's his situation. But with everybody, I ask them to represent themselves. So I don't like to be. I'm not a art director, and I'm not like. I especially in South Africa, like I feel that we gotta let people speak for themselves and not try and translate or interpolate or whatever for them. Like people don't need that. I mean, maybe we can speak different languages or whatever, but see, with photography, you don't need to read or write. You can just let somebody represent themselves on their own terms, And I like that sort of pose of defiance. When you look at him, he's certainly not a weak man or an afraid man or anything that's like that. It shows through.
That's another thing that I'm actually quite interested in, and maybe you'll tell us as we go through the portraits, for example. How do you get people to open up? I mean, how do you get people to respond? Sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
So something I'm actually quite curious about, especially with these portraits, is how do you get people to not only open up and respond positively to the lens, the camera, but to you as well, where they feel comfortable enough to actually tell you their stories. How does that happen? Tell me a little bit about that.
To be honest, it's the hidden secret of all photojournalism and documentary photography. And the reason that it's hidden is because it's actually in plain sight, but nobody really likes it. And it's that I'm painstakingly slow. When I meet people, I usually don't even have the camera around my arm. You gotta do things. See, Mpumalanga is not my province, right? It's not my home. It's not where I'm from. So that idea of being a traveler through that space was very present in my mind always, And so it's like, in my mind, like in the old days or whatever, when you'd be traveling from town to town, and you greet someone with a degree of respect and formality. You take off your hat and you do things like that. I kind of stand out a little bit in that landscape. I think that people kind of, camera or not, people are like, this guy's not really from here. But then people are interested. They were like, well, why are you here? And what are you doing? And my isiZulu is okay. It's not great. But I was able to, explain that I'm a documentary photographer and that I'm working on Zinkwadi, on a book. So not a news report or something like that, because people had also been kind of worked over by the press and kind of screwed over. So they were very skeptical. A lot of people were skeptical because of my ethnicity. They were just like, are you a Gupta? And I was like, nope, total opposite. I'm the exact opposite. I'm like the Gupta's worst enemy. I'm like a true-born South African, like fighting against this kind of stuff. And I think that because I'm so slow in some ways, or it would appear to other people that I'm very slow. And it's like, man, can't the guy just get the picture and get out of here? It's like, that's. I get people to look at me and to look at the camera on their own terms when they feel that they can trust me enough to carry that representation. And that's a heavy burden. I don't know, especially now as photography is changing, with mobile phones and Instagram and all the rest of that. But like I don't know, sometimes with photojournalists and documentary photographers, if they realize that like the responsibility that comes when somebody lets you into their life and speaks about things that hurt them, you know, and you know, steal from their lives. But then also the joy, also the things that they're proud of, like their children, you know, and the little businesses they've started, and the fact that they've got land, you know, like for urban city dwellers, we don't necessarily think of those things in the same way, but you know, you gotta go, I think, into any space as a photographer with your mind open, and not full of ideas of like, I know what I'm doing and I'm here for this reason and this and that and then that's like, you gotta, if your cup is empty, you'll allow it to be filled by the people that you meet along the way. And so yeah, that's the way that I do that. People want to be listened to first. You know, it's easy to be a paparazzi and slap on a long lens and like grab some sort of a picture and then you're like, oh, well, that's it, right? But you'll see, like with all of this, there's no way that I could ever have sneaked any of this. Is direct intentionality. And usually I say to people, you know, when you look at this camera, there's going to be people in Joburg and people in Cape Town and people wherever, you know, that are going to see this and they're going to see how you're living, right? When you look at this camera, look at them, don't look at me. You know, and that look that you see in everybody's eyes is because of that. I'm asking them to look at the world that doesn't see them. You know, and it helped with the consistency, definitely, but I think that it spoke to a much larger thing as well of people wanting to be recognized. You know, that's one of the huge pitfalls, I think, of this industry, is that it just throws people away, whether they're working inside the mine or the power station or whatever or not. And you know, we talk about like our great democracy and all the rest of that, but if people can't even be heard, you know, let alone, you know, win legal battles or actually have like tangible change within the environment or the community. But if you're not even going to listen to them on their own terms, then, you know, and companies hide behind that. But yeah.
Sure. Tell us about this image.
So yeah, this was at that same mine near Ermelo, where you know, it's an artisanal mine that the community themselves have made and are using. But this lady, she wasn't strong enough to go underneath. So at the very top of the hill is where the buckies come to pick up a load. You know, so people are selling, you know, bags of coal or bucky loads of coal and this and that, and then little pieces fall down. And so she was scraping around for those pieces, so that she gets some big enough ones so that she could have some warmth at home that night. I mean, like, that's it, right? That's what we've done to the people of Mpumalanga. We're going on about our business and we're leaving them the scraps to try and make a life with. You know, like, it's not an easy thing to see.
No.
Let alone to document. And, you know, like, I'd spent a bit of time with her like that day as well. So she'd been out into the bushes, like cutting down some firewood and stuff like that as well. So I spent a little bit of time like understanding her and she understanding me, so that it wasn't, you know, kind of like an opportunistic moment. But at the same time, I didn't really want to show her face because I didn't want, number one, I wanted it to be a sense of, you know, when a lady's got a duk and that cardigan on and stuff like that, you can see that she's older. Yeah? Like, she's not a young woman, right? And so she kind of becomes a mother, right? It's I get that feeling anyway, that she is a mother, and she's on her knees scraping, you know, like that Sade song, Pulse, you know, the scraping, trying to survive, and that's what we've done to people.
That's a heavy one.
And in the background, actually, you can see there's another lady, and she was wearing, this was a Sunday, so I don't know if she'd come from church or something, but she was wearing like one of those furry hats. You know, it's harsh, you know, but people are just, again, it's a thing. People aren't going to sit there and die and be like, oh, well, people are going to fight. Like, and this is what it looks like to fight for your life.
Sure. I mean, you can basically see the lines in those hands. And of course, those are coal miners' hands.
Yeah. This was Kosana, outside Fosman. And I sometimes I find metaphors in the strangest things. You know, those hands are like the landscape. You know, you can in nature there are no real straight lines, really, right? I mean, sometimes there are, but not really, right? And like the natural flow of the lines on his hands and the muscles and all of those things is there, right? And then it's the starkness of the soot and the coal on his fingers, you know, showing not just the lines, but also where the fingerprints have been kind of like rubbed off from the manual labor of it. And there's no denying. Like when you say, okay, you guys now all know this backstory because I've said it, but if you had to see those hands, even if you didn't know it was about coal or something, you would associate that with hard labor.
Yeah.
That's it, and that's what people are doing to survive. It's hard work, you know. Yes, but the governments or whatever would consider him to be an illegal miner. And he's got a family to feed. He's got things that he needs to do. So he takes his life into his own hands, you know. And there he is. There's actually another picture of him in the book, a full body one, and it's one of the instances where I kind of not regretted, but I second guessed my choice of using black and white because he was wearing one of the 2010 World Cup like Bafana shirts that so many of us have, right? And you see it covered in like the soot and this and that. I mean, as much as his hands are, and you think about like.
Sure.
You know, what we thought 2010 was going to be, right? And feel it, it's here, right? Like all of this stuff. And especially, you know, you go into these communities, you'll find like a 2010, you know, spaza. There's a 2010 salon or whatever, because it was so exciting for people, you know what I mean? And all this guy's got left is like, you know, this ragged shirt that he uses to cover himself now when he goes and he digs coal out of the earth, like. Well, yeah, bring it back here. So this lady, I was driving past and I saw a group of dogs following her, and then I kind of freaked out because I thought that the dogs were going to attack her, right? She was one old lady by herself. And so I got out of the car. You can't see it. It's out of the frame on the right-hand side, so it's the opposite side of the road. I got out of the car and I was like, Mama, are you okay? You know? And she's like, no, she's fine. And I was like, what about these dogs? And she's like, no, she's protecting the dogs because there's actually a dead dog somewhere behind her that had been flattened by a car. And she's like, no, when the dogs are with me, then they stay with me, right? So it was like, it's these kind of opportune moments that you find like on the road as well. Like if you just open yourself to it. I could have just driven by, or I could have been like, maybe those dogs are with that lady. But they were running, so I thought that they were after her, you know? Anyway, and she was really cool. And then I asked her, like, you know, what are you doing, moms? And she was like, no, you know, getting firewood for my house. And I'm like, why? She's like, no, I've never had electricity. And like, she'd grown up, so this is near, what is the name of that place? It'll come back to me. But it's near a mine and near a settlement which has got like these kind of new sort of RDP houses, though they are being damaged by blasts,
blasting.
right? So that is on the left-hand side of the frame. So those train tracks lead past that town, right? She lived out on the right-hand side in the kind of farmland, and she lived there. She told me her entire life, like, and I mean, now she's in her 60s, 70s, still collecting firewood like she did probably when she was a young girl, and like, you know, I mean, she said to me, in her life, nothing has actually changed. Nothing has changed, like. You know, a road to nowhere, ultimately. Dogs are a recurring theme in my work as well. I actually had to cut a lot of the dogs out. I thought it was amazing. So these 3 dogs followed this artisanal miner around a lot. They were basically his dogs. But when you're underground and you're alone, this dog running into the tunnel or whatever with you becomes like the sense of like, at least I'm not alone, you know? I mean, again, I'll just admit, like, I'm not a miner. I'm not good with like small spaces and all the rest. That's why I panicked a lot down there. And you know, there'd just always be a dog somewhere eventually like, just bounding in like, are you okay? And I love the fact that they escorted this man around like everywhere, you know. They were happy living underground, you know, for a while, watching the kids and this and that, coming out to play with them. And for me, that also emphasized that sense of community that can be built around resources, you know.
And life, right?
That's it, you know, and thinking that, you know, if there's a resource or an economic opportunity, people are just going to automatically come in and squander it. I'm like, no. I think that actually it works the opposite way around. I think that a lot of the time when things go higher up the chain towards our leaders, whether they be governmental or corporates, they do that. They loot. People only loot when they've got nothing. You know, when you've got something and there's an opportunity to build something around it, human beings will naturally do that. You know, I mean, looking at aerial footage of the area, life is dependent on water. And people will build their communities more often than not around a source of water. It's not like somebody goes there and is like, no, I'm going to build a dam and keep all of this water for myself. Like, you know, we don't give everyday South Africans, especially people that aren't like middle class or from the cities or well educated, we don't give them the same sort of humanity that we give it ourselves. And it's like, oh, you think that because this person doesn't speak your language, or oh no, because this person, you know, is not literate, or oh no, this person is whatever, right? That they're not as intelligent or as aware or as conscious as you. No, they're just conscientized in a way that you don't understand. And that's why, like, I mean, you asked me that question earlier about how I get that work. It's going in there and saying to them, you know, in my way, but I'm ignorant and I want you to show me what you know. And there's so much. I mean, this guy in the frame, he had worked as a miner at a I can't remember which company it was, one of the big companies before. And he wanted to study more, but they didn't let him, right? So he's quite old, so this would have been back in the day, right? But what he did is that he listened. He listened to the geologists and he listened to and so he got an understanding of how the rocks work. And that entire community is dependent on him, even though he's not the main man, because he can read the rocks. When I was underneath with him, right, he would show me, he's like, Nance Ngazi, right? Nance, okay. And he's like, literally, because he would show me with his hands, like how the patterns of the rock would lead him to know that if we had to keep on digging that way, it would collapse, you know? Wow. And if we had to go this way, then we're going to be okay. You know, and he would be sitting there like crunched over with like a light looking at these rocks, and all from listening from when he actually had a formal job. So, you know, the amount of not just intelligence, but then also like the will again to like take. Somebody says to you, no, you're not going to get this opportunity. Excuse me, you're not going to, you know, get your BSc or your whatever, right? And you're like, well, I'm still going to learn.
Yeah.
And if he didn't do that right now, then maybe this community of Vesselton wouldn't actually have an income now. Dogs. So yeah, this is Vosman, just south of Emalahleni, and
And also sometimes you see children playing and drinking out of those streams, right?
yeah, look, I was very careful about kids, right? Just my ethics as a South African photographer is that you can't run pictures of kids without their parents' consent and all the rest of that. So a lot of the time, I was getting images of exactly what you're talking about, but unless I could find the parents, I wasn't going to do it, right? But I mean, like this pup is in some ways sort of like a surrogate for that, you know, or a stand-in. Again, like animal life, but then also you can see that it's a pup, right? So that elicits some sort of empathy or sympathy within people. And it just doesn't really need an explanation. You can see the sift water, you can see the tailings in the background, and you can see this kind of skinny dog like licking at the crumbs of it. And again, like, that's what we've done to the people of Mpumalanga. You know, we've given them wastewater and said, drink it. We've given them, you know, a produce that's laced with coal dust and eat it. Live, make a life. What are you complaining about? Yeah. You know, so... This one was from quite early on. This was also from 2015. This is actually from that same hotel where I had this vision about making broken land. So it's what you don't see at the very bottom of the frame, because I was using a long lens on this, is that it's a golf course.
Sure.
So like, and the style, I'm not going to mention the name of the place. The style of this particular establishment is very American South, to the point of, I mean, myself and the reporter that I was working with at the time, who I dedicated the book to, Ulaki Biase. Him and I were staying at that hotel, and the next morning we went for breakfast because we were on an assignment, and literally we were the only like non-white people that were in that room that weren't working there, and all of the rest of them were in these kind of like Aunt Jemima kind of you know like frocks and this and that. And I was like, whoa, this is wildly inappropriate, especially in South Africa. And then I went out to the golf course because the planters was just there early in the morning. And it's just like, you know, we're like the opposite of bees or ants. They build stuff collaboratively, and it's actually for the benefit of the colony, right? But you look at that, I mean, so that's Secunda, and then there's all of these taxis and buses and or cars and whatever, taking the blue-collar workers and then the white-collar workers into the machine. That's what. So it's like double pollution. I mean, there's all of those cars going in to feed labor into this behemoth, you know. Yeah, I thought that was really.
And just all that pollution that's just coming out of them. I mean, you can't miss that, you know.
I mean, I kind of wish sometimes that like. This smoke that came out of here was a different color. Like maybe people would take it more seriously if they saw it as like a thick black or something. But people, you know, it mixes up into the air. It's like it's just cloudy
gone,
today.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. Ooh, so but you know, but of murkiness over the escarpment. No, it's smog. Like, and I found as well, like you know, the definition of smog. People don't like get it. Smoke and fog together. When you've got that high humidity, which you will find in Mpumalanga at certain times of the year, right? Mixed with the smoke, it's just awful. Like, and I mean, in a lot of the flares, like driving at early morning or late at night, you know, there's mist warnings and stuff, and it's like you're in a bowl of soup, man. You can't see anything. Like you can't. You got to drive around with your hazard lights on and this and that because it's just wild out there. Yeah, it's quite interesting that the end sort of last few photos that we've looked at were actually from my initial submission to the Ernest Cole Award and not necessarily the stuff that made it into the book. So like that last one of Secunda and then the taxis and the cars, that was the initial submission. I had to convince the grant committee with 10 pictures that it was worth it to gamble on me going out as a recipient of the Ernest Cole Award. And this was one of them. This was also on a trip with Lucky. And we had come back from Bethel. And just outside of Bethel. And the people of this township had said that the water coming out of the dam was poisonous, that it tasted funny or whatever. And when they told their councillors, the councillors said, no, it's fine, we drink it too.
Wow.
But then they saw, you know, trucks going in every day delivering water to the council offices. You know, and that community just had one borehole tap that they were using that was coming out of the school. So we were driving back, and you know, one of those epic high-felt thunderstorms was on its way. To be totally honest, I needed a bathroom break, which is why I left the car. But I always, at that stage, I had a little camera, a little Fuji with me that was stolen, unfortunately. But I went to go and answer the call of nature. But I was looking at the storm as well, and I was like, Now, conventionally, you can't really get a picture of lightning without having a tripod, and you leave it for a long exposure. I was just out there, and I was just like, I wonder if I can catch it.
Wow. Really?
And I caught it. Like, it took me 3 frames. Each of them are about a 15th of a second. And it's just, I mean, those kind of things I was talking to you earlier about, like, where my love for nature came from, spending time out in the bush and with my father. And it's like one of those things where after you hear the thunder, you should count.
Yeah.
Or after you, sorry, when you see the lightning, then you count, and then you see the thunder, you know. So then I just started doing that, and then it's wonderful. You know, the only thing that I can possibly compare it to, the moment that you make a frame and that you know it. Henri Cartier-Bresson used to call it le moment décisif, the decisive moment, right? When everything fits in. It's like I used to play a lot of football when I was younger, and it's like when you're a striker and you don't have to calculate how you're gonna shoot. It's just in that moment, everything. It's just you're so present. All of your training is there. The light is right. Everything is right, and you just allow it to flow through you. And I feel like a lot of the time, I really believe. I mean, the book has got my name on it and all the rest of that. But like, I feel like I'm just a conduit. You know, I'm a channel. And I see with really kind of wide and open eyes, but it flows through me, you know. And I feel like when I open myself up to that, and sure, like with the portraits and stuff, like that's considered and that's calculated and that's measured, but like the land, you know, the land beckons to us to open our hearts to it, you know. And yeah, I mean, this photo was, again, also one of the crystallizing things that when I look back at it in 2017 and I was trying to put everything together, I was like, you know, it doesn't actually say anything specific, I mean, unless you read the caption about coal mining or whatever, right? But it's just like, you get that sense that there's beauty and there's sadness here.
Yeah.
And that is the story of Mpumalanga. It's just, there's beauty and there's sadness, and it's like all of that wealth that's under that ground is like a curse.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, that's definitely something, you know, looking at the book and going through the images, I'm always struck by how beautiful the images are. So they're beautiful to go through, to analyze, you know, get the story. But at the same time, you cannot hide the fact that within this beauty, there's just so much of like destruction, hurt, pain, suffering, and, you know, and people that are having to live within this reality.
Beauty is a strange notion because we can't really define it, right?
So, I mean, Daylin, it's hard to not look at these images and still appreciate the beauty of the image themselves, right? But at the same time, one cannot ignore the fact that within this beauty, there's the pain, there's the suffering, there's the stories of the people that are having to live, within this reality. Tell me a little bit about that paradox, so to speak.
Well, look, I mean, it's two things. Number one, anybody can make a snapshot or make an image of something that's ugly or whatever, and then it's just kind of standing there and it's stark, okay? And it can be shocking, and we see that a lot of the time with Western views of conflict photography and the way that, like, for example, Africa and the Middle East is represented in the Western eye. The kind of shock value is there. I prefer a slower approach, and I think that when you use the principles of photography, like, you know, composition and lighting and framing and all that stuff, to create a balanced image, you know, you literally, like painting with light. You can not just arrest a person like you could with the shocking photo, so they'll stop and take a look, okay? You can do that. You can do that with beauty, of course. But I think that you also let people consider it for longer, because they stay in the picture longer when it's not blatant or gory or you know, just difficult to look at. The truth is difficult to look at, but we've got to look at it and we've got to read it, you know. And I think it's like instead of trying to avoid the horror, to contemplate it and to look upon it and be like, okay, this is it, you know. So there is beauty. I mean, there's beauty in the land of Mpumalanga, but it's you got to look for it, and you got to find it. So there's that part of it. The second is that I think like most people, many photographers as well, like I never wanted to make ugly images or to make things that would necessarily offend people or hurt them or something like that. But I always wanted to make beautiful images, but I was never interested in stuff like models or cars. I didn't really find beauty in that, right? For me, when I picked up the camera, there was always a social edge to it. And I read something once, I don't know if it was by Susan Sontag, but she said, or whoever this writer was, that if you're interested in photography, you're not really interested in photography. You're interested in looking at the world, you know? And that's what the camera has always been for me. But I was always, as a child, like quite artistic. Like I used to draw a lot. My dad used to encourage me a lot with that. And I guess that, my journey with photography, more like hard news and all the rest of that at the beginning, but it was always about confronting things. And yeah, it's another great quote. I mean, James Baldwin says, not everything that can be confronted can be changed, but nothing can be changed without first confronting it. And I mean, that's a part of it for me. I've never really done this before, but my inspiration for the way that I do my photography actually comes from a poem that I read when I was I studied literature as well. When I was at Rhodes, I majored in photojournalism and English lit, and I'll read it to you. It's a little bit different. It's not about what it's literally about, but instead of a pilot, if you could apply this to a photographer, I think that this is the way that I think about it. I know that I shall meet my fate somewhere among the clouds above. Those that I fight, I do not hate. Those that I guard, I do not love. No likely end could bring them loss, nor leave them happier than before. No law, nor duty bade me fight, no public men, nor cheering crowds. A lonely impulse of delight drove to this tumult in the clouds. I balanced all, brought all to mind. The years to come seemed waste of breath, a waste of breath. The years behind. In balance with this life, this death. And I mean, for me, like being alone in the field or whatever with the camera, ultimately, it is about the lonely impulse of delight. When I first picked up the camera, it was this amazing, joyful thing, like, wow, I make pictures. And I hope that I never lose that and it never becomes too calculated or too professional or too whatever, because it's in the midst of all of this ugliness, there's still that enterprisingness and that endeavor to go out and find my country, to find my people, and to see.
Sure. Thank you so much, Daylin. I mean, this has just been really such an incredible honor to be here with you and to really get to hear and really experience with you the powerful work that you do, with the power of the lens as well. And really, I think for the CER and, the partners we work with, and most importantly, the community of Mpumalanga, the many people that we've seen in your images, the stories that are available in the book as well, we definitely really appreciate and are very grateful for this incredible gift that you have as well as a creative, and really for choosing to take that path in honoring, those stories that really need to be told. So thank you.
Look, I mean, I accept your gratitude, but at the same time, number one, I'm very, very grateful to you guys. I'm grateful for the work that you do, because all of these images, they are just what they are. I mean, they're images, they're photographs, right? But what can be done about it? I mean, that's what lies within your ambit, and the work that you guys do is incredible. It's remarkable. And I think that ultimately, what I'm trying to do is not really that different from what you guys are trying to do. It's my civic duty. It's my responsibility as a citizen of the Republic to defend it and to defend all of its people to the best of my ability. And I mean, I'm not a politician. I'm not a wealthy businessman. I'm not a soldier. I don't have those skills. I've got a camera, but I give it willingly because that's what all I've got to give. And we will succeed because we have no choice. We have no alternative otherwise. Like what's happening to the people of Mpumalanga is simultaneously, it's right now, but it's also a vision of what will happen to all of us. You know, these companies will churn us out the way they've churned them out. They're just the first line. They're the first wave, you know, and we've sacrificed them because we thought, oh, it's out there. You know, it will come to us. It will come to all of us. And that's why I fervently believe, like, until we find that sense of citizenship and of saying that, you know, the people that this are happening to, these are my people. You know, and until we make it that personal, we're never going to win. But we're getting there. We're getting there slowly as a people, and as I think the climate crisis, for all of its negativity, the one thing that it's done is that it's provided, in some ways, the opposite of broken land. And the opposite of broken land is common ground. And I think that now more and more, like everyday citizens, not the role players, not the leaders, not the companies, everyday citizens are realizing that, you know, the common ground is the earth itself, and we need to fight for it. And so thank you to CER for being who you are and for doing what you do, all of you in your different ways. I mean, lawyers, the different heads of departments, every different role, it's all towards the same goal. And that's actually, you know, what an ecosystem is.
Yeah.
You know, whether you're the top of the food chain or you're the little microbe at the bottom, it's that everything has its part to play towards that environment living. And I just think that, you know, myself and CER and the alliance partners, people like, you know, Life After Coal and Groundwork and stuff like that, we're the same ecosystem, you know, from the same water. And yeah, we're all just doing our part.
Indeed. And just before we wrap up, of course, the book is available.
Yeah. You can get it off my website, daylinpaul.com. Or else just email me at daylin@daylinpaul.com. I haven't got an automated system set up yet, so everything is very personal. So that's good, and that also means that if you'd like a personalized message in the book, I'm happy to do that. Just, I mean, a couple of things on the book very quickly is that it was designed in such a way so that it's not. It wasn't meant to be a coffee table book or something that was very elite or supposed to only live in the cities or the salons and the antechambers of the wealthy. It was designed to be small enough to fit into a backpack, which I found is common with most activists, right? And it was meant to be some sort of, like a body of evidence, you know, some sort of a tangible documentation of, you know, when people look back in time, maybe 100 years from now, what was the climate crisis situation like in Mpumalanga? There's at least one document now, do you know what I mean? That's not necessarily in words. And I've only scraped the surface of it. You know, to be honest, there were about 9,500 images that made up the entire collection. And out of that, less than 1%, so we're talking 68 images made the final cut. So it's not exhaustive, but it's meant for the people. It's not meant for intellectuals necessarily or for you know, it's not supposed to be in elite spaces. And the book should belong with everybody. And I'm hoping to also be able to get more of these out. I mean, we've already started giving some people in Mpumalanga copies, people that I worked with there, or people, activists that I've met. It's just a matter of financing now, because it may be my book, but I still don't get it for free. So, yeah, drop me a line, and maybe we can connect, and I can send you guys a copy wherever.